that one's still a ways off. Let's continue. Canada reaches 2% NATO defense spending target. Canada officially met. I think we've seen this one. Like this has been there for a little bit. What's the new goal? Like they're thinking like trying to push for 5% now. I don't know if that'll happen. Like what is it? The US spends 3.5% of their GDP on defense or offense, military spending. Um, Still significantly higher than 2. So, I mean, pushing more defense spending, I think spending's tough because unless you're like the US and you can like get geopolitical gains from having a large military, then it's kind of like just money thrown into a burning pit. You could spend that on infrastructure instead, and that actually gives you something that can help do stuff for your country. But you need a military. You do. I don't know if I'd support the 5% goal or let's see. I guess I can just ask, right? Does NATO have a new 5% spending goal? Where did I hear that? See if I can figure that out. Investigating NATO spending. I put it on thinking mode. Take a second. Yeah, so like I personally wouldn't don't think we should push for like a 5%, but like 3.5 matching US GDP spending on defense. I think that would probably be a good goal. Yeah, sure. NATO officially established a new 5% spending goal during the 2025 summit in The Hague last summer. So then even the US isn't there at the new goal. Maybe that's why they're getting mad at NATO. You know, they don't want to bump their spending up. This represents a massive shift from the two. Yeah. What actually means. Okay, here we go. The new target is technically called the Hague Investment Plan. It is more nuanced than the old flat 2% metric. Okay. It breaks down into two specific categories to be reached by 2035. 3.5% for core defense. So that's probably what I was reading about when I saw the US numbers. They were like 3.5 to 3.7, I believe. This covers traditional military spending, troop day. Yeah. 1.5 for resilience and innovation. Okay. So this wouldn't show up on standard defense spending. So when Canada's reached 2%, it's 2% for core defense. 1.5% for resilience and innovation. This is new security related categories. Allies can count spending on protecting critical infrastructure like pipelines or cables, cyber defense, and strengthening the domestic defense industry based towards this portion. There is also an intermediately milestone where allies are expected to reach 3.5% of GDP by 2029. Are any countries currently meeting the 5% goal? How much is Canada spending on core defense and how much is it spending on resilience and innovation right now? What else did it say about it here? Just that we've reached the 2% NATO defense spending target. why it matters, the strength of Canada's position in Atlantic security alliances amid global tensions, including responses to conflicts like the US-Iran situation. Okay. No countries have officially hit the 5% mark yet, but a few are getting remarkably close. The 5% target, known as the Hague Investment Plan, was only established in the summer of 2025 with the federal deadline of 2035. So like that's 10 years. Who's leading the pack? Well, no one is at 5%, yes. Yet, Eastern flank countries are the most aggressive. Poland spending roughly 4.7, the Baltic states, okay. United States currently sits around 3.4 to 3.5. Oh, well, the US has the largest budget in raw dollars. It actually has to increase its spending as a percentage of GDP to meet the new NATO goal. Okay, so when I read that, that was including core defense, resilience, and innovation together. Okay, let's have a look. Canada's current spending. Canada has made a massive jump in the last year. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that Canada has officially reached the 2% GDP benchmark for the first time in decades under the new NATO goal. Split here is where Canada's now. Core defense, about 1.8 to 1.9% of GDP. The vast majority of Canada's current spending goes towards core defense, salary, existing, the massive 9.3 billion infusion announced last year for equipment and readiness. Resilience and innovation, 0.1 to 0.2% of GDP. This is the newer category where Canada is just starting to ramp up. The government recently launched the defense industry strategy to focus on this area. Recent down payments on this 1.5% goal include, okay. So all of ours is core defense, right? Okay. So we're ramping up defense spending. There's several wars in the world right now. Probably a good idea. All right. U.S. stories. U.S. and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. Strait of Hormuz temporarily reopened. What? It hasn't reopened, has it? Can we find a better one? Ooh. Is the U.S. blockade Trump's riskiest move yet? I want to know. So, from what I understand, there were negotiations that went on over the weekend. Um, Nothing changed. And when they come back from negotiation, now Trump is blockading the Strait of Hormuz.
So
Let's hear about this.
Iran blocked 20% of the world's oil trade by threatening to blow up oil tankers that dare transit through the Strait of Hormuz. So the US just responded over the weekend by announcing its own blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. At which point,
So then, was Iran still transporting their oil to throughout the war? Has Iran been transporting their oil to market throughout the war? Despite the intense conflict and the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz in early 2026, Iran has been remarkably successful at keeping its oil moving to the market. So they're still getting money for their oil while in a protracted conflict with the US. While the 2026 Iran war has caused the largest disruption in global oil history, Iran export machinery has proved structurally resilient through a combination of dark fleet tactics and a near total reliance on the Chinese market. As of mid-April 2026, Iranian oil exports remain surprisingly active. So they're not only transporting their oil to market, they're getting the inflated prices for it too. Like if anything, this means they got more money coming in, right? Okay.
One way to look at that is the way this writer at the New York Post sees it. A brilliant call, like saying, you block the strait, I block your block. Now, there may be two ways of looking at this, as the Jerusalem Post put it. Is this 3D chess or grasping at straws?
I block your
Grasping,
block.
because this war has now dragged on
I counter your counter spell.
for a month and a half. And peace talks, the vice president's most recent attempt in Pakistan to end the war,
Okay, I heard about
they
this.
seem to have gone nowhere.
So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement.
But let me offer a third way of looking at this, which is that this new US blockade represents an escalation in the war of a very different sort than we've seen so far. That it injects a new kind of risk, more than one, actually. And we can understand that risk by starting with what a blockade would actually look like.
Okay, so if you're blockading Iran, does that mean, like, clearly you're stopping them from exporting their oil? Are you then, like, occupying their tankers that are exporting oil? Because odds are, like, wouldn't these be like Chinese tankers? A lot of countries, like, their tankers aren't like flagged and operating in a specific country. They'll have different flags. They'll have crews from like somewhere in Asia, because that's just where labor is cheaper. So you would have to blockade everything. I guess they're stopping everything that isn't their own oil from getting through anyway, right? Pretty much anything that gets through, you could pretty much say is carrying Iranian oil. Blockade a blockade.
So step one to understanding what a US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz looks like is sorting through Trump's own contradictions about it. Peace talks between the US and Iran collapsed over the weekend, with Trump's VP saying this about Iran.
The simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term. We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will.
Now, Trump expands on this news by saying, so there you have it, the meeting went well, most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz.
Like, wouldn't you blockade their when you started a war? Am I missing something here? Like, allowing them to profit from the war seems like a bad idea. I get in war, you don't want to hit civilian infrastructure. You want to avoid that, but stopping their exports, that just seems like step one. It's the first thing they did to the countries around them when they got the chance, right? They shut the strait down.
Now, at first blush, this didn't really make any sense. Because if Trump's most urgent goal has been to reopen the strait, why block, quote, any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz? It's like the geopolitical equivalent of telling your boss, you can't fire me because I quit. You can't. It's like the geopolitical equivalent of telling you or leave the Strait.
Again. Is this, so this is what it actually looks like? So, Google, oh. Google Maps the Strait of Hormuz. Can I get not this view, but like a satellite image view? Or ooh, layers. I don't think I'm going to get an image like that. I don't know if that's real or not. Because if that's real, you can literally see the paths where large tankers could travel.
Strait of Hormuz. It's like the geopolitical equivalent of telling your boss, you can't fire me because I quit, which is fine, but it doesn't get your job back. So thankfully, the next day, we got this clarification. The United States to blockade ships entering or exiting Iranian ports on April 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And U.S. Central Command would confirm.
April 13th. Today. The blockade starts today.
A blockade of all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports. And
like a blockade is something that is a long-term measure. You're not going to see the effects of a blockade in a week. It's going to take months before you see an effect of a blockade like this, which at least shows to me that they're appearing to enter into a longer scale war. They're prepping for this to last longer. They went to have negotiations to see if they could get a peace deal. They could not. Now they're ramping up for what may be a protracted war.
including all Iranian ports.
Which means, do I still have that saved? How are our oil prices doing? I mean, after that dip, they've kind of just been going gold and steady at just under $100 a barrel. The world doesn't know how, I mean, the oil futures don't know how to deal with it yet. There's clearly still some hope that this ends quickly.
On the Arabian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. So, okay, the US isn't blocking Saudi tankers exporting their oil to China. It's specifically choking off Iran's ports, which is effectively telling them,
what did I miss? They're only choking off Iran.
Saudi tankers exporting their oil to China. It's specifically choking off Iran's ports, which is effectively telling them, if you block the world's oil, we block yours. But do you know how many ports Iran has? The country has almost 2,000 kilometers of coastline leading to the Arabian Sea, which means a blockade of
all their oil. See this? All their oil is like up in here. Like this section of the world is blessed with oil. Kuwait has all their oil here. Qatar has their gas here, in the ocean mostly. Saudi Arabia has all their oil up here. All of the oil funnels into this area and then comes out here. Like Carg Island is their oil or their oil storage place because all their oil is up here. So if you're like blockading something, you don't have to blockade an entire coastline. Like you're not going to have oil tankers filling up down here. It's only going to happen up here. Let's see what he says.
Which means a blockade of Iran's ports doesn't just mean sealing the Strait of Hormuz.
From my understanding, U.S. ships are not approaching Iran. Like their aircraft carriers and fleets are still like 1,000 kilometers away, way out into the ocean. So, like, are you tracking them with satellites then? And then intercepting them once they is that the goal? I mean, if you could do that, you should have been doing that already.
It means preventing ship access here. I count 5 ports
Okay.
just in this 20-kilometer span. It also means blocking ships coming out of this bay. I see ports with boats here, here,
So
here,
they're talking
here.
they're talking about all boats. So this is not a blockade on just oil. This is a blockade of exports through the ocean in its entirety. Okay, so then you do have to block off all of it.
Here, here. And you know what you'll find as you head even further east? Yeah, more ports.
And so the question is, how many ships are actually going to leave Iranian ports? Are the US forces going to be able to track them? All of these are, I mean, no pun intended, but, uncharted waters.
So the first challenge is building the wall. Not so hard when you're just blockading one port, even 2. You can choke off near or, let's say, far. But as you widen the area you're blockading, you have to keep making that net wider and wider, or else you risk creating.
And as I said, their boats are not actually like the US military, US Navy, not actually getting that close to Iran.
Weaknesses where ships, can slip through.
But do you risk that? Like, we see this with the exact what Iran is doing, like the threat of attacking a ship that's going through the Strait of Hormuz. Like, the threat alone has completely shut off shipping. Like, threat alone will stop most export. As long as you go out and get some of the ships, then nobody's going to take that risk. I mean, like, I don't even know if this is a good idea. Like, shutting down their oil exports, I don't know why they weren't doing that in the beginning. But, like, most imports and exports are just like consumer, right? Shut that down, you're just going to hurt the people of Iran, not the regime. Whereas I feel like oil is something that the regime target that, and it affects the regime far more than it affects the average everyday citizen. I don't know.
Now, I'm not saying that this isn't doable for the world's strongest navy. I'm just saying it's an investment.
But ultimately, you're going to need to monitor every one of those ports with ISR platforms, drones, Predator, and other aircraft that we flying overhead. But not just having eyes on the ports. You need to be able to have the capability to respond. That requires.
Can't you do this with satellites? Like, we were looking this up. Find a port. This looks like it'll have a port. I know Karg Island has ports. Let's go Karg Island. Like, as a civilian, I can go in here and I can look at ships. Little boats. Bigger boats. Where do they load oil? Here we go. I mean, look at the size of that thing. Look at how much detail I can get. Does that have a helipad on it? You telling that the U.S. military's got better stuff than this? I don't know if you need drones. These are more oil tankers being fueled up. That pipe must get there under the water. Oil tankers. Why? Okay. There's no point to see the sea out there. Sail rig. But like you can see, I don't think you need to have perfect vision of it. These are all oil. Oh, okay. I'm not using this taken. Anyway, like that's the way to do it.
Naval assets, everything from ships to frigates to helicopters and elsewhere. So that's going to be the challenge.
But then you have to ask the question, what happens when there's a point of contact?
When you blockade a strait, you basically threaten ships to stop. And if they don't stop, they would potentially be boarded or fired upon.
Any vessel that's going to try and break the blockade is going to face what's called the Visit Board Search and Seizure, VBSS operation, that can be carried out by Naval Special Operations forces that are trained for this.
So you have American forces stretched across a wider area, engaging not in black and white warfare, but in a potential series of encounters with lots of gray. An Iranian warship approaches. Maybe the US blows it out of the water. But what if it's a Russian or Chinese or Indian tanker?
Yeah, like that. Doesn't China, like most of Iran's oil goes to China. So I imagine Chinese tankers are carrying a lot of that oil. So what are you gonna do there?
Do you threaten? Do you attack? Do you board? And while that encounter plays out, what's Iran doing? Watching? Intervening?
There is a legal and geopolitical challenge if intercepting vessels linked to major powers like China. What is the United States going to do? Is it going to cease? It's going to be not letting these ships go. So that can lead to escalation beyond Iran. So the enforcement becomes selective and that creates loopholes.
But the other concern I've seen raised about this new chapter of the war against Iran in the Middle East is how this blockade represents a very open-ended commitment to putting American troops in harm's way.
Deployment orders are never specific. They're always open-ended. So that is unfortunately the reality, especially considering the fact that right now the U.S. Navy is the only one shouldering the burden to enforce this blockade on Iran right now.
There are no clear objectives. There are no desired outcomes that are specific, and they seem to be changing all the time. So in this,
You see, like this is the problem. I don't see 40 chess going on. I see something very reactionary. What is the long-term plan to remove the regime?
particular case, when you ask me how long will it last, I have no idea, because the administration does not have any idea.
The point here being that you don't just do a blockade in the same way that you do an airstrike. An airstrike has a predetermined endpoint. The strike happens, then it's over. Even a whole series of airstrikes can have a clear goal: destroy these military bases, destroy these leadership compounds, destroy these bridges. But a blockade, you don't do a blockade, you maintain one. That's a 24/7 operation with military support, with mine clearing operations, as Trump has explicitly called for now, and with no clear implicit success condition. Because when does the blockade end? It goes until something fundamentally changes at some unspecified future date, or it won't. Because what the Trump administration says it's waiting for is for Iran to abandon not just its nuclear program, but its nuclear ambition, something even J.D. Vance admits he only hopes will happen.
We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America.
Now,
I mean, I'd say that's bad news for the world, because that means the oil shock will not be resolved and shall continue.
Vance may be right on that count. The economic hit to Iran, if its oil tankers can't deliver oil, figures to be nearly 2 million barrels a day. At the fresh highs of over $100 US per barrel of oil on world markets, that's more than $100 million of product every day that isn't bringing foreign dollars into the country. But if Iran's oil stops getting out, that affects the global supply.
He's right. You put a blockade on it. So I imagine the reason they were allowing them to continue exporting is to try and mitigate the oil shock. And now that Iran isn't coming to the table for the negotiations, they just have to commit to a full blockade, which will act as a increased pressure on inflation and the oil price. The oil price and inflation.
And therefore the global price of oil. That'll get squeezed even further. The price of fuel, even as far away as North America, may very well go higher. And this blockade will be the most recent sign that despite weeks of attacks, assassinating Iran's leaders, bombing its defenses, destroying its infrastructure, that even on those dire terms, Iran refuses to give the US what it wants. Diplomacy has failed, and the war rages on.
I mean, like, that about sums it up. Diplomacy has failed, and the war rages on. Is there anything else? US-Iran talks in Pakistan, not a one-time event, but a process. Trump deletes AI depicting himself. I think I heard about that one. I actually want to watch that. I wanted images of the Strait of Hormuz because I really liked the one he showed. This way. Strait of Hormuz images. Right. Okay, so that's like an official CNN image. Yeah, like it's not as wide as you think it is. All satellite images. Separate by yeah, so there's like marsh there. you can see how you kind of have to follow these deep lanes. So for a while in here, ship's position is very predictable. And that there's not exactly like a lot of navigating room.